$2 billion cutting-edge SAGD Christina Lake project. Imagine this. There you have a company willing to risk $2 billion and create thousands of jobs in the middle of a recession, but our government wouldn't let them. They had to go through 5 years of red tape. And it's not just oil and gas. I was talking to a small business guy in Cochrane recently. He said, Jason, I've been trying to get a permit from my town to erect a prefab steel structure on my plot of land in an industrial zone, and it's taken over a year. I still don't have the permit. What's going on? What happened to our Alberta? That should happen in 1 day, not 1 year, right? Why is it that we can't build anything anymore in this province? The Peace River Hospital? The government made that financial commitment 8 years ago, and it's still not done. The NDP canceled the contract, and I think they're probably going to, well, there's a lawsuit. I better watch my words, but...
Grand Prairie.
Did I say Grand Prairie? I didn't mean Peace River. I mean Grand Prairie. Thank you. Grand Prairie Hospital. You know what I'm talking about. You thought I was announcing a new hospital here, right? Walked right into that. Why does it take 8 years to build a hospital in Alberta? What is going on? What happened to the Get Her Done Alberta? You know, this is what we need to bring back. And that's why I'll appoint a minister for cutting red tape. Now, you might think that this is pie-in-the-sky stuff, but it's not. The BC government, under Gordon Campbell, 15 years ago, appointed a minister for red tape reduction. The goal to reduce red tape by a third. They actually cut it by 41% in 4 years and helped to set that province up for 15 years of strong economic growth. We can do the same. This is Alberta. When I say the Alberta advantage, I mean the best tax rates, the lightest regulatory, and we can do this without lowering environmental or occupational health and safety standards. It's about applying common sense, right? So those are some of the things that we'll do to show the world we're open for business again. But now I have to make my last point, which is the fight of our lives, the fight for our resources. Why did Justin Trudeau veto Northern Gateway as soon as he took office, and then surrender to his friend Barack Obama's veto of Keystone XL without a peep of protest, and then kill Energy East, and then bungle Trans Mountain, and then bring in Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines law, and then C-48, the Northwest Coast tanker ban, and the federal carbon tax, and tell the NDP here they had to cap oil production. Why all of those things? How did that happen? How do we end up with an NDP government here saying that they think it's embarrassing, that we're the embarrassing cousin no one wants to talk about? Well, friends, 11 years ago, there was a gathering in New York City hosted by the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation, attended by 24 so-called environmental organizations like the David Suzuki Foundation, the Tides Foundation, and others. Over that course of that conference, they developed a strategy known as the Tar Sands Campaign, the explicit goal of which was to landlock Canadian hydrocarbon energy. Those organizations who participated in that strategy have collectively received hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign foundations and sources of funding. Why did they choose Canada? Why didn't they deal with the United States, which doubled oil production in the past 10 years? Why did they do nothing to stop the increase of 10 million barrels per day of consumption of oil in the last decade, since they started the Tar Sands campaign? Why did they do absolutely nothing to constrain or protest oil produced by the socialist dictatorship in Venezuela, or the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that treats women like property instead of people, or the dictatorship in Iran that spreads terrorism and conflict around the world, or Vladimir Putin's Russian autocracy? Why did they only focus on this liberal democracy with the highest human rights, labor, and environmental standards on earth? I think the answer is they figured out that we Canadians are too nice. We're pushovers, as you said. We're the kid in the schoolyard who's easiest to bully. How do you get a bunch of Canadians out of a swimming pool? You say, hey, would you Canadians please get out of the pool? And they say, sorry, as they clamber out. That's who they think we are, the soft targets. What do you think would happen if Elizabeth May showed up and did a protest in Venezuela? Or let alone Iran? What do you think would happen to Tzeporah Berman, who our premier appointed as her top advisor on the oil sands, if she tried to do a protest in Saudi Arabia? Well, I know what happened to Greenpeace when they did a protest against oil in Russia. Putin locked them up in a Siberian jail for 6 months and they never went back. I'm not suggesting that. For the record, I'm not.
But now that
But okay, I guess that's not a unanimous view. But you get my point here. And so we need to fight back, friends. We have to stop apologizing. We have to stop calling ourselves the embarrassing cousins that no one wants to talk about. We need, you know what, Canadians are nice, but you can only push them so far. And our history is filled with the courage of Canadians who ultimately who are peaceful people, but ultimately will stand up and fight for what is right. And this is right. This is not just about our economic interests. Because it's actually a moral cause for the world. In a world where there is growing global demand for oil and gas, the question is whether we surrender that market to the world's worst regimes to fuel oppression, violence, conflict, and environmental despoilation. I think it would be better for the world to produce more ethical Canadian energy to compete with and ultimately displace dictator oil from around the world. It is a moral cause. And that is why I'm proposing a fight back strategy. It starts like this. I'm sorry, Dan, have I just blown the schedule here? Okay. You guys haven't even got your beef yet, so. Start point 1. A war room in the Department of Energy with a big budget that will respond in real time to all of the lies and myths told about our energy sector through paid, earned, and social media. It will set up satellite offices in key media markets around the world. And I will use the persuasive power of the Premier's bully pulpit all across Canada, dans les deux langues officielles, y compris pour convaincre nos amis québécois de l'importance de cette industrie pour leur province and in every other part of the world. Secondly, we will make partnerships with our pro-development First Nations, because I am so frustrated with this tiny minority of anti-development First Nations getting all of the media, legal, and political attention. We need to stand. We need to stand with the forward-looking, pro-resource First Nations leadership who are being abandoned by our governments. You know, on the Trans Mountain Pipeline, virtually every First Nation, dozens of them along the route, support that pipeline, have been partners in it for 6 decades, have benefited from it with no environmental problems. And yet, a tiny minority of BC First Nations got foreign funding from that coalition I talked about, and they managed to go to the federal court and suspend Trans Mountain. How does that happen? How does a tiny minority get to crush the opportunity for the large majority? In northern BC right now, there is a brave group of First Nations called the Eagle Spirit Consortium, who are trying to revive Northern Gateway and oppose Trudeau's ban on Canadian oil exports off the northwest coast. They're trying to fund a legal challenge to say the federal government violated their right to be consulted before it shut down Northern Gateway and the northern coast. But they don't get any money from Trudeau. They don't get any money from these U.S. foundations. If I am the Premier of Alberta, I will write checks to support those First Nations to go to court and defend their rights. Their right to development, their right to prosperity. This is a moral cause for all of us as Canadians. There is no greater cause for us now than to stand with our First Nations people in moving them from poverty to prosperity and to independence. And then we will make it clear to these multinationals who are ganging up in Alberta, that there will be consequences.